Wasabi wallet. Unfairly private.
What's up, everyone? Ben with the BTC Sessions here, and this is your daily session.
Hodl that Bitcoin.
Before we dive into the news, of course, shout out to sponsors of the show, LEDN.io. This is where you can use your Bitcoin to utilize a few different services. Of course, they have their Bitcoin savings account where you can earn interest on your Bitcoin paid in Bitcoin. They've also got their Bitcoin-backed loans. This is where you can use your Bitcoin as collateral to obtain a US or Canadian dollar loan. So if you're in a pinch and you need to get your hands on dollars, but you maybe don't want to sell your Bitcoin because you think it could be a bad time, well, this could be an option for you. And finally, if you're a huge Bitcoin bull, you can check out their B2X offering, which is the ability to gain double the exposure to the price of Bitcoin. If you want to check out any of these, there's a link down below, and if you opt to get a loan, they'll actually credit your account with an additional $50 worth of Bitcoin. And secondly, we have Rise Wallet. This is exactly what it looks like. It is a Bitcoin gift card that you can give to anybody and onboard them very easily into Bitcoin. And how easily? Honestly, it is so idiot proof. I did put together a tutorial, but the long and the short of it is you pick up one of these at a store near you, you scratch the back and scan the code with an app that they've created, and the app instantly creates you a personally held Bitcoin wallet on the spot and then sends you a Bitcoin transaction for the face value of the card. It's only available in Canada right now, but they are looking at expanding. So just head over to risewallet.com, click on locations, and see if there's a spot near you where you can pick one up. If there's not one yet, you can head over to coincards.ca and get one delivered to your home as well. I hope you guys enjoy it. It is, again, a fantastic way of easily onboarding somebody. With that, let's dive into the news. So the big news of the day, in my opinion, is the European Central Bank, or the ECB's response to the proliferation of things like Bitcoin. And what they've put together is a white paper for something called EUROchain. And it goes pretty in depth into what they hope to do with it, how it would function. But I think it was best, so I'll link to this white paper down below, but I think it was best summed up by this guy, JP Thor, on Twitter. So let's just go through his tweet storm. I did read through the white paper as well. But yeah, he does a pretty good job of getting everything here. So we're just going to go through all of this. So he said, threat on the EUROchain, this thing is pure evil. It is the most invasive, Orwellian, and authoritative financial system I've ever seen. Quick summary of the white paper here. Number one, the ECB is the central issue of these CBDC units. CBDC is central bank digital currency units. The units live on the EUROchain, which, believe it or not, follows the Bitcoin UTXO model. So the same way that when you spend Bitcoin, you're spending UTXOs and creating new ones. Already it is apparent that the chain cannot have anonymity, as they call it, as at best it can only match Bitcoin's pseudo-anonymity. So obviously Bitcoin is not inherently anonymous. You are not necessarily attached to your wallet when you create it, but you can create links between you and your coins as you move in and out of kind of KYC AML services, or if you publicly disclose an address you've utilized. So, two, they admit this. A participant can build a knowledge graph based on information collected over time. This means that details of past transactions can be seen by new holders, intermediaries that were not involved in those transactions. So again, not surprising based on the way that Bitcoin functions. Users cannot generate their own wallets. They have to apply to intermediaries like retail banks to gain a new account. Its intermediary will prepare the transfer and route it via the AML authority, sending additional information on the payer. So you can't just create a wallet like you could with Bitcoin. You actually have to go to the bank and say, hey, can I please get a wallet? So already a step down from Bitcoin there. EUROchain has the ability to control wallet access and CBDC volume. So an excerpt here, allow the overall CBDC volume to be controlled if, for example, the number of wallets per citizen and the usage by non-citizens were restricted. So they're saying that They can control wallet access and prevent you from spending more than you're allowed to. Tough luck if your intermediary goes offline. A technical failure on the part of the original intermediary will result in users being unable to access their CBDC balance or spend, and in some cases even receive units. So if your bank of choice happens to be offline, then tough shit, you can't spend or in some cases even receive money. However, their workaround is that they'll just let other banks reach in and do it for you, enabling other intermediaries than the original one to access the user's backup CBDC units. So basically, access to your private keys could be spread across multiple intermediaries, which is a fantastic idea. We all know. So large value transactions are approved, denied by the AML authority with full access to user data. Small transactions, they have invented something called a novel concept. It's called anonymity vouchers. So how does this work? The AML authority issues these additional time-limited states to every CBDC user at regular intervals. If users want to transfer CBDC without revealing information to the AML authority, they need to spend these vouchers at a rate of 1 voucher per CBDC unit. So essentially what happens is you have a wallet issued by a regulated entity, so you can't create a wallet yourself. You can then have CBDCs, whatever the currency will be, and then the anti-money laundering authority will also issue you these special tokens that are one-to-one that allow you to spend a certain amount of your wallet balance anonymously. So what would happen is, let's say you have, $10,000 and they only let you spend like $100 or $1,000 anonymously. You would say have 1,000 anonymity tokens. So you could then, what you have to do is you go to your bank and say, I would like to spend this digital currency to this person. I'd like to spend $1,000 of this anonymously. Here are my 1,000 anonymity tokens. At that point, the bank would then go to the AML authority and say, hey, here's this person. They want to spend this to another person. They've included their anonymity tokens for this small transaction. So you can let this pass by and go through the system without having to check their information. If you don't have enough anonymity tokens and you try to do that, then the AML authority will just say no. So if you want to spend $1 over that, not allowed. The whole thing has to be not anonymous. So they're allowed to basically smack you down and say absolutely not. Moving on. So JP is starting to sum up here. The chain is prison land. Every transaction is monitored and approved or denied. Every anonymous transaction are done with a UTXO model between users managed by custodial intermediaries. So that's important to note, because even when you're transacting anonymously, there still is a chain which can be tracked. Okay, so the anonymity tokens just means that your information is not necessarily your identity is not necessarily given to the AML authority, but again, that information can be leaked via on-chain data, and you don't really have any any say over that. Okay. Furthermore, there's no ability to generate a wallet. And finally, users can never access the chain. This is the important thing. Auditability only for the central bank. The underlying banks get portions of the chain, and individual users essentially have no access to the chain, no auditability whatsoever. So they'd have to take the word of the central bank and the partial word of the banks of what's happening on chain. There's no visibility there, which is very similar to how things currently operate. Moving on. In summary, the EUROchain is pure evil, and this is not an idea. It's being paraded around by the ECB as the solution to digital currency. If you are a European citizen, an Orwellian nightmare is coming our way. Get your euros in cash immediately and opt out before it's too late. The other interesting thing here I find is regarding the anonymity tokens. So the ECB, or rather, I guess the central bank would have the ability to issue these tokens. So they're allowed to say, okay, individuals are allowed to spend at this rate, and here's your anonymity tokens, and just kind of dish them out, just barely let people have them. So but they have the ability to issue them, right? So if the central bank wants to issue more anonymity tokens to different entities, they can do that. So this is like it's insane, because it's like an absolute centralization of power, where this central entity could potentially issue ways for people to do anything anonymously that they want if they're approved by the central authority, by the state, right? So the central bank has total control. They can transfer money as anonymously as they like. Plus, they get to see everybody else's transactions. They get to dictate who gets to move money anonymously in tiny doses. And even then, they can likely track on-chain what's going on. Meanwhile, the people at the bottom, regular citizens, are limited in anonymity. Really, that anonymity is non-existent anyways, because they can still use chain analysis. And furthermore, they have no access to the chain, and so they cannot in any way, shape, or form audit anything that the central bank or the banks below it do. So, the bright side here is that essentially there's a better option to this, and people need to just simply opt out. Now, right now, it's a little bit easier to opt out because you have, cash in your pocket. You have banks that you can still transact in relatively easily with online exchanges. But in a system like this, as JP Thor acknowledges, is if you wanted to send money to an online Bitcoin exchange and swap your euros or dollars or whatever for Bitcoin, the central bank itself could just prevent that from happening. They could say, no, this is not an approved transfer, and just swat down the transaction right off the bat. The other thing that they allude to in the ECB white paper is that banks, there's a difference between ECB tokens, like the actual currency, and then commercial bank created money like credit. And so that would be different. It's almost like you would be able to withdraw ECB coin or whatever or the CBDC coin into a personal wallet that is issued again by a bank, or there would be almost like a separate form of currency, which would be like the credit created by banks. So it almost like creates a differentiation, whereas right now you just see the bank and you just see dollars in your account, and you don't notice the difference between like the fractional money created and the base money. So that I find interesting as well. Anyways, if you want to check out the white paper or this thread, I will link them both below. Let's move on. So Coinfloor, one of Europe's oldest online exchanges, has decided to go Bitcoin only. So I find this, I actually really enjoy this. So they've opted to delist Ethereum and Bitcoin Cash. They say that it's because that Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency that has proven itself so far. So to elaborate on that, he said, purely objectively speaking, if developers are working on a replacement to Ethereum, they don't believe that it currently solves the problem it was meant to solve, referring to why they decided to delist Ethereum even though it's been around for a fair amount of time. They're referring to the fact that they're working on Ethereum 2.0. So essentially what's happening right now is they're saying like, hey, we've got to scrap everything on Ethereum and just create an entirely new currency that will be the next version of Ethereum. So obviously they don't have confidence in the current state of Ethereum if they're needing to do that. And then he went on to say that Bitcoin is already solving the desired problem today, despite continued efforts to kind of make it more efficient. It's still solving that problem. So he says, people are looking at improving Bitcoin, but to be clear, the view right now is Bitcoin is already a good solution to the problem. Everything else is cream on top of the coffee. It is already solving the problem today. Now, they did go on to say that Ethereum could be relisted if after 2.0 comes out, it moves on and actually proves itself as a viable currency or a viable digital asset. But he said that realistically, Bitcoin is just so far ahead of everyone else that it's the only coin worth dealing with at this point. So interesting. And that kind of moves into this article from CoinDesk here, which is actually a podcast that you can listen to, the productization of Bitcoin maximalism. And it's a short podcast, and they discuss how in the kind of free market space, a lot of companies are either moving towards Bitcoin only or are just starting straight out the gate as Bitcoin only. And they also go on to talk about the contrast with something like China saying blockchain, not crypto, and some of like the Wall Street, State Street kind of sentiment of digital assets versus blockchain. So yeah, interesting to see that. I mean, the digital asset versus blockchain makes sense in a business sense for people that are trying to make money, that are used to like Wall Street trading. Well, of course, they're going to like multiple assets where they can charge fees swapping between them. Just from a business standpoint, obviously that's going to make more money than simple onboarding, offboarding. But I think the opportunity costs over time will become apparent, especially with something like Ethereum, where it's doing hard forks couple weeks apart and businesses have to keep up with that. It just makes it very, very difficult and impractical to do on a regular basis. Let's move on. So Circle Pay, they were a player in Bitcoin early on. They did have a wallet app where you could onboard and offboard and buy Bitcoin. But eventually they actually moved away from that, just became kind of like a US dollar, like PayPal, Venmo version type thing. And a lot of people were pretty mad when they decided to get rid of Bitcoin. It was like they jumped in for the mania in 2013, a little bit of 2014. And then when, the lows of the bear market hit, they were like, nah, we're out. Oddly enough. And so a lot of people saw that as them just capitulating and not really putting their money where their mouth was and not having any conviction. Well, actually behind the scenes is they were seeing that they were getting way more volume, and it was way more prudent for them to focus their resources on their over-the-counter desk. So they were buying and selling Bitcoin, but in larger volumes to individual clients. Well, that business continued to move on. Well, Kraken has now acquired Circle's OTC desk, here's a quote from the CEO, Jeremy Allaire. He said, "We have." This is part of their blog post, rather. We have known and admired Jesse from Kraken and his team at Kraken for many years, and we have every confidence and expectation that Circle Trade customers and partners will continue to be the best-in-class OTC liquidity service and responsiveness through Kraken going forward. Circle Trade represents an enormous success for the industry as well as for Circle, and we're excited to see Kraken grow it further." So the reason as to this sale is stated as they're looking to actually sharpen their 2020 product roadmap and focus on their stable coin, which I find to be very backwards thinking. But I don't know. Again, I guess Circle has never really known what the hell they're gonna do. It seems like they're aimlessly just trying to find a business model somewhere in there that sits between like a PayPal, but also issuing a currency of their own. And I don't know. I guess we will see what happens moving forward. But I think the Circle is missing the mark here. And I think that Kraken is smart to have bought up their OTC trades, because now they also get all of that volume. So yeah. Now, moving on to some news about Kraken that is a little less positive. A former Kraken employee is suing the exchange for unethical and illegal business tactics. So I took a look through this. A part of it was just he was saying that some of their business was coming from people that were either on like the no transaction list, like the U.S. Has a list of countries and individuals that are embargoed, that are not allowed to be transacted with, and he was saying that Kraken, some of their business or a portion of their volume was coming from these individuals or locales. He also said that there was some shady stuff where potentially the money that was represented on the exchange was actually not all there at certain times, and also that they asked to use his address to apply for certain to use his home address as a local address in order to apply for certain accounts at certain banks, while also not reimbursing him for that. And then he said that it was also kind of shady with stock options for employees, and that things that were promised were later amended in the contracts without any official sign-off. So a bunch of stuff there. Again, it's all alleged, but I guess we'll see. But even though a lot of people refer to Kraken as being the cleanest exchange in history, maybe not the case. Time will tell. We'll see. And let's move on to one last thing here. So BitGo is kind of a custodial service for digital assets. They do Bitcoin and a variety of others, one of which used to be Bitcoin SV, oddly enough. But apparently Bitcoin SV is just making that impossible for them. So they're doing a hard fork known as Genesis. And so what this will do is it's going to get rid of something called pay to script hash, P2SH, and this allows for stuff like multi-signature, which is how BitGo functions when creating secure vaults for people's money. By disabling P2SH or pay to script hash, BSV essentially is forking them away from any functionality on the BitGo platform. So what they've said is that clients will need to take one of two actions before February 4th, contact BitGo via sales@bitgo.com and convert your BSV holdings directly to Bitcoin, or move your BSV to an external wallet. If you continue holding BSV in your BitGo wallet after February 4th, you will only be able to sweep the wallet and most functionality will be disabled. So in making this move, essentially any service that relies on any sort of multi-sig functionality will no longer be able to deal with BSV at all. And they're referring to it as BSV deprecation. So yeah, I don't know. BSV forking itself into obscurity. I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, always hit like, subscribe, and share. Especially share. It's great to get some new eyeballs here every time. If you want to help out the show in another way, you can hit up the sponsors that I mentioned down below. That is LEDN and Rise Wallet. And while you're down there, be sure to check out Wasabi Wallet to get some privacy on your Bitcoin and keep your financial transactions away from prying eyes. And finally, if you really liked what you saw, you can always drop me a few sats at my tippin.me page via a Bitcoin Lightning Network transaction. With that, I am out. Have a wonderful evening, and I will see you tomorrow for your daily session.